What's up, everybody? We're here to go over UFC Vegas 94. Amanda Lemos taking on Jandiroba. No results to go over. Obviously, we're coming back off of a week off, so there wasn't any fights, this past weekend. And yeah, so that kind of cuts down all the bullshit I got to go through at the beginning. Please like and subscribe, guys. It'll help me out a lot. And if you're new to the channel, what I do is I go through and I give out each of my picks for all the fights, and then at the end of the video, I give out my bets for this card. Don't ever charge anybody money for anything. Do accept donations, whatever. Super thanks. I forget that I have that option on YouTube. If you're interested, there you can buy the super thanks and help me out. So, but yeah, man, and the show's also available on Spotify, Pandora, all your major streaming platforms, and if you're not interested in watching my videos or listening to the show. You can go to my social medias if you just want to see my picks and my bets. Highkick_fight picks, Instagram and TikTok. And there's a Facebook group, High Kick Fight Picks on Facebook. Pretty easy to find, and feel free to post anything you want in there that's MMA related. Post your bets. I like seeing everybody's stuff, man. I don't want it to just be me only posting all the stuff in there. And I post my bets in there pretty close to the time of the fight, so I don't get them out there too much ahead of time. But I do post, like, when they announce new fights and stuff like that. I post all that in there, and I'll ask everybody who their pick is and stuff like that. And yeah, one day I'm hoping to do a lot more with all this stuff. It's hard to do more than I am right now. With all the work, my regular job and everything. So hopefully one day I'll be making some money from YouTube or something doing this, and I'll be able to put more into this and go over more organizations and stuff like that, and do a deeper dive into, like, start doing the prop betting and stuff like that as well, which I usually intend to do that, but I forget. So sometimes I remember, most of the time I don't. But yeah, we had a few fights fall out on this card. Dan Ige was supposed to fight Chepe Mariscal, that fell out. Dan Ige was supposed to fight Joe Anderson Brito, that fell out. And then he ended up fighting Lopez on short notice. So he's got another fight booked, I think. Still, it just got pushed back a little bit. Originally, Cortez was going to fight Miranda Maverick. And, of course, Cortez got moved up to the upcoming main event against Rose Namajunas. So, but yeah, man, let's get into this card, guys. First up, we got Miranda Maverick taking on Diani Barbosa. Hopefully I said her first name right. I think I always misread it as Diane, so now I don't know if that's right or not. But Miranda Maverick is 27 years old. She is 5'3" with a 65.5-inch reach. She is 27 years old. She's 13-5 and 6-3 in the UFC, and she's a -180 favorite. So this fight doesn't really make sense, whatsoever. Looking at what these two women have done in the UFC, it's not even close. Barbosa barely won her last fight against a relatively, inexperienced, fighter that was only 5-0. And but I guess Maverick was supposed to fight Cortez, and she wanted to stay busy, so that's probably why they put this fight together. She's fighting someone who's brand new to the UFC. And Maverick has never been finished. 1 win by knockout, 7 wins by submission. She's pretty well-rounded, not a big power puncher at all. And there is and has always been kind of a lot of hype on Miranda Maverick, and I've always kind of been, not on that train, but at the same time, a lot of her fights, are favorable to her. So, I mean, while I agree that she wins, a lot of the fights she had, I just think that once she gets up to a little bit higher level of competition, she might start struggling a little bit. But that's just me. She is very good. Don't get me wrong. Her best win was probably over Gillian Robertson. Other than that, I kind of expected her to win all the other fights. If she had beat Andrea Lee, a few years ago, I probably would have been a lot more impressed with her last fight. But we've seen that Andrea Lee is kind of just isn't quite, what she used to be recently. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful or anything, but, she just isn't as fast and isn't quite as good as she used to be here lately. But either way, no doubt that Miranda Maverick should win this fight. She's looked better in every aspect of fighting than Barbosa. Supposedly on paper, Barbosa should have a big advantage with her jiu-jitsu. Being known for that before the UFC and everything, even before MMA, I think she just participated in grappling stuff. But we haven't seen it in the UFC yet. She looked really bad in her last fight. She gassed out and was shooting sloppy takedowns and unable to keep her opponent down after the first round. And Maverick has the better striking. She's more technical. She throws better kicks, puts out better volume. She all around has better technique in everything she does, and she has the better wrestling, I'm pretty sure, as well. Maverick will be at a big size disadvantage in this fight, but that's nothing she hasn't dealt with before. Maverick will have a big advantage with her cardio and her pace and pressure. Maverick shows 47% striking accuracy with 60% striking defense, 46% takedown accuracy with 41% takedown defense. And a lot of people would see that and be like, oh, Barbosa will be able to take her down. But if what we saw in Barbosa's last fight is all she has, I don't think she's going to be able to take Maverick down, especially after the first round, once she starts slowing down. Maverick averages 2.5 takedowns per 15 minutes, and she lands on average 3.80 strikes per minute while absorbing 2.60. And she's taken on Barbosa. She is 32 years old. She is 5'6" with a 66.5-inch reach. She is 7-2 and 1-0 in the UFC, and she's a plus 150 underdog. She's never won a fight by knockout and has 3 wins by submission. She's never been submitted but was knocked out one time. And the only impressive thing I can point out, on paper for her is she somehow has a win over Silva like 5 years ago. But I don't think that would happen again if they fought again now. Silva is a way different fighter than she was back then. But other than that, hasn't fought a lot of tough competition outside of getting knocked out by Josiane Nunes a few years back. She will have a 1-inch reach advantage and be 3 inches taller. She just fought 2 months ago, and I doubt she will be adequately prepared for this fight against someone with the experience of Maverick on such short notice. Her gas tank looked terrible, like I said, and she may have some success early in the fight. Maybe she can swing a takedown, but Maverick is pretty good at getting back to her feet, so I don't see her being able to keep Maverick down if she couldn't keep her last opponent down. If she wins, I think it would be by submission, but Maverick has never been submitted, so it doesn't look good, in that aspect either for her. So honestly, outside of something really crazy happening, I think Maverick is better everywhere the fight goes here, and I'm going to take her to win by decision. Next up, we got Muhammad Usman taking on Thomas Peterson. And Muhammad Usman is 35 years old. He's 6'2" and got a 79-inch reach. He is 10-3 and 3-1 in the UFC, and he's a minus 150 favorite. I called him at a little bit better price than that. 4 wins by knockout, 2 wins by submission. Never been knocked out, but was submitted once. This is probably going to be kind of a boring fight like usual for Usman. The UFC have kind of been steadily feeding him fights that aren't, all that dangerous for him. Like even the Mitch Parkin fight, while he beat Usman, it was a pretty boring fight, and there was little to no, action, and they just, neither of them were really trying to go for a finish in that fight. They were just kind of content to outpoint each other. And once again, they're giving Usman, another kind of green opponent here that hasn't won a fight in the UFC and lost his debut to a guy who most people don't consider to be very good. Both these guys have a wrestling background, but we have, seen that if these guys, well, especially Peterson anyway, I don't know why I said these guys, but if Peterson, fights guys that have okay takedown defense, he can't get the fight to the ground. Jamal Pogues isn't really, a super high level wrestler and doesn't have super, good takedown defense, and Peterson couldn't get him down. So I don't see him being able to get Usman down either. Where was I at? Oh yeah. So I called it last time out. I knew Peterson was going to lose to Pogues, and Peterson just was it was not very impressive, man, what he showed, and there was a lot of hype on him. Leading into that fight, he was a big favorite. Peterson hadn't really up to that point fought anybody that was good, and a lot of people would say he still hasn't, after losing to Jamal Pogues, but Pogues is all right. He's a tough guy. keep losing my train of thought, guys. Sorry. Usman has the better striking out of these two, but he doesn't put out a ton of volume. Doesn't tend to go for broke and really try and get a finish a lot of the time, but occasionally he'll land a big shot. He's got the big power. He has decent cardio, unless he's really constantly shooting for takedowns, pushing a wrestling heavy attack. He's going to have a 6-inch reach advantage. His striking has improved quite a bit, since the Ultimate Fighter show. But it's still really just kind of good basics. Works the jab, the 1-2 combination. He constantly throws that. He's got like two combinations that he really kind of throws a lot outside of just using his jab. He throws 38% striking accuracy with 52% striking defense. 19% takedown accuracy. They don't have his takedown defense, which probably means nobody's tried to take him down yet. He averages just under 1 takedown per fight, and he lands on average 3.18 strikes per minute while absorbing 4.21. He's taking on Thomas Peterson. He is 29 years old. He's 6'1" with a 74-inch reach. He is 8-2 and 0-1 in the UFC, and he's a plus 125 underdog. 8 wins by knockout, 1 win by submission. That doesn't make sense. Maybe I wrote that down wrong. He's got 8 wins. How can he have 8 wins by knockout and 1 by submission? Huh. Yeah, something doesn't add up there. His record says he has 8 wins, and it's saying he won 9. Huh. I don't know, guys. I don't know what's up with that. Somebody's lying somewhere. Yeah, never been submitted, but was knocked out one time. And like I said, wrestling background, but couldn't get Pogues down. He does have good speed on his punches and whatnot, but just didn't really look good in his debut, after the first few minutes of the fight. So I don't think he's probably going to be able to get Usman down. And if he can't get the takedowns, he's probably going to lose. And I'm really not a huge, Usman fan, at least, but at least, this Usman anyway. But I do think he's going to edge out another decision here and land the better shots. And who knows, maybe he'll land that big shot and actually get a knockout. But I do think Usman's, got this one in the bag, and the price is reasonable on it. So next up, we got Cody Durden taking on Bruno Silva. And a lot of people, Cody Durden's heavily favored on this, in this fight, and I actually struggled with it quite a bit. And I don't think a lot of people are probably going to agree with my decision here, but I'm not getting heavily invested in it. Cody Durden is 33 years old. He is 5'7" with a 67-inch reach. He is 16-5-1 and 5-3-1 in the UFC, and he's a minus 145 favorite. 6 wins by knockout, 5 wins by submission, and most of his losses have been by submission. So submission defense and awareness have been the weak points in his game in his past, but he's made tons of improvements, and he has a wrestling background, pretty good takedowns, good singles and doubles and trip takedowns. He's fought some tough competition. He got out-wrestled by Tagir Ulanbekov last time out, and even outstruck. He got dropped once early in the fight, and then he ended up getting submitted. This is good matchmaking because Silva is very tough as well, and Cody's going to have a 1-inch reach advantage, 3 inches taller. He pushes a really tough pace through the first 2 rounds, but he does tend to slow down a lot in the third. He gets really tired, and because of that, he will use a really wrestling heavy pace, and that's what tires him out, usually early anyway. And he's going to have to use his wrestling in this fight because Silva's a knockout puncher and a finisher, all the way around. He may do all right, on the feet, but I think Silva has the power advantage. And we have seen Silva out-wrestled before, but that was by the guy that beat Cody Durden, Tagir Ulanbekov. Cody is strong with his body lock. It took a long time for me to admit that Cody's a pretty good fighter, and mainly because I just didn't like him as a person, back then. But he's got a lot of good wins and proved a lot of people wrong, throughout his time in the UFC. And he's very good at transitioning to the back. He throws decent calf kicks. Outside of his loss to Jimmy Flick, he's really only lost to tough competition. He's good at cutting his leg across the belly and wrapping it around so the back take is always there. He mixes together his wrestling with his jiu-jitsu control very well, and he shows 52% striking accuracy with 51% striking defense, 50% takedown accuracy with 67% takedown defense. Averages almost 5 takedowns per fight, and he lands on average 3.16 strikes per minute while absorbing 2.89. He's taking on Bruno Silva. And, you wouldn't know it by what Bruno Silva's been doing in the UFC recently. But he was very much so known for his grappling, early on in his career. Um, and he is a very good grappler, very good jiu-jitsu. He is 34 years old. He's 5'4" with a 66-inch reach. He is 13-5-2 and 3-2-1 in the UFC. He's a plus 120 underdog. 5 wins by knockout, 4 wins by submission. His first few wins in the UFC, while they were impressive finishes, weren't over really good competition. But his last win over Tyson Nam was a great win, very impressive. Not only did he hurt him, he dropped him with a big punch and then submitted him, which most people thought Nam was going to knock Silva out. So Silva throws really hard calf kicks. He has really good kickboxing. He hits very hard. He's very fast. He's kind of small for the weight class, but he's very good at circling and using good footwork. And if we go back and watch the first round when Silva fought Ulanbekov, he showed a very good ability to get back to his feet early in that fight. And if he can do that and use those leg kicks on Durden like he was in the first round of that fight against Ulanbekov, it'll give him a good edge and start to this fight, which is probably going to be his game plan, man. And it was a good game plan for him against Ulanbekov. I think he just kind of got tired, and Ulanbekov started controlling him. I don't think Cody's as good of a wrestler as Ulanbekov, so I'm kind of, I think Bruno Silva has a lot better chance than most people think in this fight, honestly. He needs to come out and hammer Cody with those leg kicks, stay light on his toes, and stay moving and stay away from the cage for sure. Silva throws great combinations, and the reason I bring up the Ulanbekov fight is because, yeah, Silva lost that fight, but Durden, like I said, isn't as good as Ulanbekov. So there's a lot that Silva could have learned from that fight, and a lot that he can apply in this fight from that fight. So Silva has a nasty right hand. He's well-rounded. We used his lost my train of thought. He uses jiu-jitsu, in his last fight. He trains with Henry Cejudo and another guy who's close to his size, which is with really good wrestling. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that he could stop the takedowns, and win this fight. Silva throws nice uppercuts, throws really nice spinning attacks as well, and he lands them a lot. And he's used to fighting guys that are bigger than him, so I don't think there's anything he's not used to. I really want to pick him. Everyone else is going with Durden. Silva was switching stances a lot in his last fight, back and forth, giving different looks. And, I kind of... Either Cody wins by decision or Silva wins by knockout, Possibly submission. Maybe hurts Cody and jumps on a submission. I don't know. For some reason, I understand why everybody's going with Durden. But for some reason, I just kind of have a feeling that Bruno Silva is going to end up getting the win here. As far as the method of victory, I think he's going to land a big shot and possibly jump on a choke. I'm going to go against the grain. And also watch for that front kick up the middle that he landed against Tyson Nam in his last fight. With Cody constantly looking for takedowns, that'll be a weapon. Knees, front kick up the middle, uppercuts, all those will be on display. Everyone's leaning pretty heavily towards Durden, man. Next up, we got Luana Carolina taking on Lucy Pudilova. I was a little bit confused on this one because originally, I'm pretty sure Luana Carolina was the favorite, and she's heavily favored on here, like heavily favored on Tapology, 85%, and now the line has switched and Pudilova is the favorite. And I had thought about that a little bit when I was breaking down the tape on this fight. Pudilova does come from a kickboxing background and does have decent striking. Which is, and Luana has good takedown defense, so this fight's probably going to play out on the feet. But I mean, Pudilova just hasn't been having the success in the UFC, so there's a lot to go back and forth on in this fight. Luana Carolina is 31 years old. She's 5'6" with a 69-inch reach. She is 10-4 and 5-3 in the UFC, and she's a plus 110 underdog. 3 wins by knockout, 1 win by submission. She's very tough. She has kind of an awkward, style of striking. Just altogether kind of an awkward style because the way she throws her punches and shit, she kind of throws them like, she gets off balance and throws them from weird angles. And, does kind of leave her chin out there, but nobody's really been able to, put her away, aside from Molly McCann. But but yeah, man, if you let her get ahead, she can steal the rounds and win fights, and she may be a lot better than people give her credit for, me included. She missed weight in her last fight. She is going up a weight class in this fight. She's going to be shorter, but she's still going to have a 1.5 inch reach advantage. She went out there and got a knockout finish in her last fight, which is, her first in quite a long time, and maybe her first in the UFC, if I remember correctly. She fights southpaw mostly, but she will switch back and forth at times. She tends to throw wide looping shots. She uses good pressure. Actually has pretty good takedown defense, man. Some of the best in the flyweight division, honestly. They said in her last fight that she has that's what they said in her last fight, that she has some of the best takedown defense in the division. But also hasn't fought a whole ton of high-level grapplers. Her last fight was a high-level grappler, but not a high-level wrestler. Where was I at? Now, she has very long legs and arms and uses them very well. It's hard to get her down, and she counters very well. Good straight left hand, keeps her hands pretty low at times. She doesn't really get tired. Puts out pretty good volume. She looked good in her last two fights, and we probably haven't seen the best of her yet. And she's fighting a girl here on a 2-fight losing streak. So this is a good opportunity for her to show off here. And this fight will most likely play out on the feet, like I said, and it could be close. It'll be interesting because Lucy, Pudilova was known for her striking. The first time she was in the UFC, she got caught and she came back, and she, has been using kind of a heavy, grappling attack and fighting that way. So I don't know what she's going to choose to do here, but I don't think she'll be able to get Luana down. So probably going to play out on the feet. Luana shows 50% striking accuracy with 49% striking defense. 43% takedown accuracy with 77% takedown defense. She lands on average 4.63 strikes per minute while absorbing 3.63. I need to wake up. Can't talk right. And she's taking on Lucy Pudilova. She is 30 years old, 5'8" with a 67.5 inch reach. She is 14-9 and 3-7 in the UFC, and she's a -130 favorite. 3 wins by knockout, 2 wins by submission. Never been knocked out, but has been submitted one time. She's never really, had a win over a good competitor in the UFC. Her last win was over a fighter on a 3-fight losing streak. She's tall. She had a close fight with Jocelyn Edwards. She probably has the cleaner, more technical striking out of these two, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's going to get the win. Doesn't have the best takedown defense, and I could see a world where she outstrikes Luana to a decision. She does have great ground and pound if she could get it there. We saw Pudilova years ago have a fight of the night with Irene Aldana, so it's not impossible that she wins this fight, I guess. But I'll probably stay away from this one altogether for the most part. But Lucy shows 39% striking accuracy with 51% striking defense, 28% takedown accuracy with 67% takedown defense, and she averages half a takedown per fight, and she lands on average 3.68 strikes per minute while absorbing 3.83. I'm going to take the underdog and go with Luana to win this fight by decision. But like I said, I'm probably going to stay away from this one. Next up, we got Brian Kelleher taking on Cody Gibson. And Brian Kelleher is 37 years old, coming up on 38, 5'6" with a 64-inch reach. He is 24-15 and 8-8 in the UFC, and he's a +195 underdog. 8 wins by knockout, 10 wins by submission. Has a wrestling background, good jiu-jitsu, but he didn't show anything in his last fight other than solid leg kicks. He's been submitted 8 times and knocked out twice. 3-fight losing streak, but against really tough competition. You got to give him that. Batista, Nurmagomedov, and Cody Garbrandt. Honestly, can't hold those losses against him. Not really any impressive wins in the UFC. I guess he did beat Odie Osborne back in the day, but he has fought a lot of tough competition. He's going to be at a huge height and reach disadvantage here, and he's only fought once in the last 2 years, and he didn't appear to be able to take a punch in his last fight. Coming off a knockout loss, I picked him to win. I thought he was going to chin check Cody Garbrandt, and I was completely wrong. And yeah, he looked terrible, man. He folded. He showed that he doesn't really belong, up there at the top of the division, where former champions and stuff are. He'll want to look for the takedowns in this fight, but I'm not sure he'll be able to get them. I don't see him getting the better of the striking in this fight, but this is a big step down in competition compared to his last 3 fights, so you never know. He shows 42% striking accuracy with 55% striking defense, 42% takedown accuracy with 60% takedown defense. He averages 1.75 takedowns per fight, and he lands on average 3.39 strikes per minute while absorbing 4.64. He's taking on Cody Gibson. He's 36 years old, 5'10" with a 71-inch reach, 19-10 and 1-5 in the UFC, and he's a minus 240 favorite. 7 wins by knockout and 4 wins by submission. He's never been knocked out, but has been submitted 4 times. He's a good fighter, man. He just hasn't been able to find success in the UFC yet. Outside of, it was a very entertaining fight, man. That he had on the, in the Ultimate Fighter, the finale, for the contract. He looked really good early, kind of faded and lost the last half of the fight. But it was a really fun fight, man. And he has a win over John Dobson outside the UFC a few years ago. That's a good win. He has good striking. He's the more technical striker out of these two. He puts out a lot of volume. He pushes a really tough pace early. He's going to have a 7-inch reach advantage, and he's going to be 6 inches taller as well. So I expect him to use that. And, he also had, 2 tough fights back-to-back so far. Miles Johns is a tough guy on a good run right now. And this is definitely a winnable fight for Cody, man. And he showed on the Tough Show that he can beat the younger guys trying to come into the UFC. And I think he would do better to be a little bit more patient and actually use his height and his reach, because he always has an advantage there in all of his fights. And the only reason that he gets, hit against the smaller guys is because he stays in their face rather than staying out of range and trying to use his length. But who am I, to say that? But I mean, I think that he should try and do that, and it would save him from getting hit a lot. He needs to use his front kicks and his jab and then set up that big shot. He shows 44% striking accuracy with 57% striking defense, 29% takedown accuracy with 68% takedown defense. He averages 1.28 takedowns per fight, half a knockdown per fight, and he lands on average 4 strikes per minute while absorbing 4.08. I'm going to go with Gibson to win this fight here. I think he's going to finally get a good win in the UFC. I'm going to take a win by TKO. TKO round, let's go round 2. I think he's going to look good this time out and finally get a little something going for him and get some confidence built up and maybe win a few fights, man. So it'd be good to see. It'd be good to see. Next up, we got Hyder Amil taking on Young Lee. And Hyder Amil is 34 years old. He is 5'9" with a 70-inch reach. He is 9-0 and 1-0 in the UFC, and he's a plus 200 underdog, which I find pretty crazy. 5 wins by knockout, 1 win by submission. Obviously, he's undefeated, never been finished, won his debut. But Fernie Garcia, unfortunately, hasn't really been able to get a win in the UFC. But one thing Fernie Garcia does do well is he has great boxing, and he's got good power. And Amil went out there and exchanged with him, got clipped a little bit, but then ended up finishing him on the feet. So, I mean, I think Fernie Garcia is a pretty good fighter, man. He just needs to shore up that takedown defense. Yeah, so, I mean, he did beat a decent guy in the Contender Series, a guy with a lot of experience, has fought all over the world. But this will probably be the toughest fight of his career. He switches stances back and forth, using that to set up his kicks. He's well-rounded, good wrestling as well, big power on his shots, great knees in the clinch. Was kind of not fighting smart in his last fight. When he hurt Garcia, he was going crazy, leaving a lot of openings, and he got caught at one point. I'm sure that's something that they will kind of, work out of him, after that. But he also didn't lock in. He didn't lock in the body triangle when he was on the back, and he ended up getting reversed because of that. But he did survive, and then he got the reversal himself, and ended up being on top, and then eventually got the win. So it all worked out in the end. So I guess I can't say too much about it, but. He pushes a crazy pace. He throws a ton of volume, big power in his hands. He's undefeated. So, I mean, I'm really surprised how heavily favored Lee is on Tapology and how Amil is just a big underdog here. Amil goes to the body a lot with his punches and kicks. I think Amil would destroy the guy that Lee just beat, Blake Builder. Which leads me to believe that this could be a close fight. Amil is clearly deserving to be in the UFC. He's been very dominant in all of his wins. He's got all the skills, and he will definitely be a lot faster than Lee's last opponent and have a lot more to bring to the table than Lee's last two opponents as well. So, and he's taking on Jiang Young Lee. He is 28 years old. He is 5'10" with a 73-inch reach. He's 11-1 and 2-0 in the UFC, and he's a -250 favorite. 4 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission. He's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage. He had a lot of finishes on his way to the UFC, but as is often the case, when the level of competition goes up, sometimes the stoppages, aren't as frequent. And he had a close, split decision win for the UFC contract, and won a dominant decision over Blake Builder, who I was never really that high on him. Going into that fight, I don't remember if Blake Builder was a favorite or not, but I'm pretty sure I went with Lee on that one. Where was I at? He's younger. There's more room for improvement, but he is fighting an undefeated guy here, man. And Lee throws great kind of like jumping in, leaping in punches to the body that really hurt guys. He throws great knees on the break. He's used to guys constantly trying to take him down. Builder just didn't have anything for him in that fight, man. Builder was shooting sloppy takedowns up against the cage. There was no sting on his punches, so Lee was able to do whatever he wanted, and he looked great in that fight. And this fight won't be quite so easy because Amil fights very aggressive. He hits very, very hard. And Lee fights with his hands low and then kind of like, also with a low stance to kind of help stuff the takedowns. Pretty heavy on the lead leg. And he does have very good wrist control, uses his jab very well. He does leave his chin up in the air at times when he throws his combinations. Stands real heavy on the front leg, like I said. So be looking for Amil to work the leg kicks if he can without getting countered. Lee seems really well-rounded from what we've seen so far, and I went back to his split decision fight with Yiza to see what Yiza did that gave Lee so many problems and compared that to Amil and his abilities. Yiza was using, his body lock and working his way around to the back and working the trips and grapevine in the legs, and it was just a relentless wrestling attack. And Amil doesn't really fight that way. He has more of like explosive double leg takedowns and singles out in the open rather than working up against the cage, which I think he could possibly have success with in this fight. As far as the striking goes, Amil gives Lee a lot to worry about. He's good at getting inside and landing big power shots, while Lee tends to fight longer. And I could see this fight going either way, honestly. And I think Amil is a better wrestler than the last two guys that Lee fought, and has more power in his hands than anybody Lee's fought probably. But Lee has more of a technical advantage on the feet, I think. Whereas Amil kind of wades in like Mike Tyson and throws big shots, and it's very effective, don't get me wrong, but just not as technical. And I guess like I've said before, if I really struggle with a pick, I'll go with against everyone and take the undefeated fighter, the underdog and Amil Hyder to win this fight. Neither of these guys have been finished. My instinct is to take him to win by knockout because that's how he wins most of his fights. But, Lee is tough, man, so I guess I'll go with Amil to win by decision. Possibly using his wrestling, possibly landed some big shots, maybe landed on damage. I think he steals at least 2 of the rounds. Next up, we got radzhabov taking on Trey Ogden. This is another one I had a lot of trouble with, and I'm actually I put this up on YouTube to see, what everybody's picks were on this fight and see what everybody else was thinking, because I was having kind of a lot of trouble, picking on this, and I'm going to pull that up and look at it and see what the results were so far. So I had 26 votes, and actually 69% went with Trey Ogden, and 31% went with radzhabov, which surprises me because I didn't think there would be as many people leaning, Trey Ogden, in this fight. Because my instinct, I'll talk about that in a minute anyway. radzhabov is 33 years old, 5'11" with 69-inch reach. He is 18-5-1 and 2-1 in the UFC, and he's a -150 favorite. Both these guys are kind of big lightweights. Loic has always looked so much bigger than all his opponents. Loic has big power in his punches. He has decent wrestling and good Not really all that good takedown defense. I was going to say good, but when I think about it, I've seen him taken down quite a few times. We have seen him struggle with the leg kicks, though, which is something Trey will probably look to use in this fight. 8 wins by knockout, 5 wins by submission. He's only been finished once, and he's never been submitted. He was a PFL veteran, before the UFC, so he's fought decent competition throughout his career. He was struggling with the footwork and movement of his opponents early in his last fight, but he eventually got the knockout. The biggest thing for Loic in this fight is he can't let Trey, fight his game plan, because Trey is a very smart fighter, very smart coach that comes in with a good game plan every time, and Trey will fight smart. Loic will have to make the fight ugly and try not to gas out and try to land his bigger shots and get a knockout. I know Loic has a power advantage on the feet, and I don't know about the wrestling, because Trey has, I think, 100% takedown defense so far, so I guess we'll find out, but I would say Loic has pretty good wrestling. Trey has good wrestling and takedown defense as well. If I have to be honest, I want Trey to win this fight. I've become a fan of his over his last few fights. My instinct when I first saw this fight was to go with Loic, coming off a big knockout win. But I could totally see a world where Trey comes out and steals the decision just by fighting smart. Uses his footwork, pops the jab, hits the leg kicks, maybe gets the takedowns, and wins a decision. Loic shows 43% striking accuracy with 46% striking defense, 58% takedown accuracy with 56% takedown defense. He averages 6.73 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he lands on average 2.93 strikes per minute while absorbing 4.73, which are kind of bad numbers. He gets hit a lot more than he lands. He's taken on Trey Ogden. He is 34 years old. He is 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. He is 17-6 and 2-1 in the UFC, and he's a plus 125 underdog. He's never won a fight by knockout, so it's obvious that Loic has the power advantage, but Trey does have 11 wins by submission. He was primarily known for his grappling before the UFC, and he's never been knocked out, but has been submitted a couple times. He has a win over Daniel Zellhuber, who's gone on to do a lot of good things, and he's looked good, in his last two fights, and he's going to want to do what he did to what was the guy's name? Nicholas Mata, sorry. He's going to want to do what he did to Nicholas Mata, in this fight. He used his reach and he stayed on the outside, just beat up, Mata with the calf kicks and his jab, and busted Mata up, in that fight. And then whenever Mata got too wild, he took him down and controlled him on the ground. And we have seen Loic taken down a lot in the UFC, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that Trey does take him down. Like I said, Trey fights very safe and smart. He doesn't take unnecessary risk. Great basics with his boxing. Good calf kicks, good jiu-jitsu, and I've just grown to respect him as a coach and a fighter a lot, and how good he has done with a lot of the guys that he trains and coaches and all that. So he's definitely going to have the cardio advantage. I have no doubt if this fight goes to the third round, Trey will win that round. But also he can fight smart as he wants, but it's always possible that it won't matter if he gets clipped with a big shot. So, which is the only thing that scared me out of picking him now that I think about this fight. Trey's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage. He has a great jab, good check left hook. If Trey can get the takedowns, he can definitely win this fight 100%. He shows 48% striking accuracy with 58% striking defense, 24% takedown accuracy is what it says, but it clearly hasn't been updated because it says he only has landed one takedown, but he's scored multiple takedowns in his last two fights, so that's not accurate. It's probably a lot better than that. And it says, like I said, it says he only landed one, so I know it's wrong. But he has 100% takedown defense, which makes me want to pick him even more. And he lands on average 3.38 strikes per minute while absorbing 3.59. So do we go with the guy who fights smart or the guy with the power, man? And I don't know, man. I've been going back and forth with this. Originally, I was going to pick Loic. Then I wanted to pick Trey. And then I asked everybody else what they thought. A lot of them are going with Trey, so it kind of makes me want to go with Trey. I guess I'll go with y'all, man, and I'll go with Trey to fight smart and end up winning this fight by decision or possibly by submission. I don't know. Loic's never been submitted, I don't think. I think he can go out there and fight smart and maybe steal the rounds. Oh, hopefully get the takedowns because, Loic's a lot to deal with on the feet. But I'll go with what y'all said, man. I'll agree with y'all on that one because I was struggling with it and didn't really know what way to go. But probably won't be betting on that fight whatsoever either way. But as far as making a pick, I'll agree with you guys. Next up, we got Steve Garcia taking on Sungwoo Choi. And Steve Garcia is 32 years old. He is 6 foot tall with a 73-inch reach. He is 15-5 and 4-2 in the UFC, and he's a minus 140 favorite. 12 wins by knockout and no wins by submission. And this guy has really turned around and showed us how good he really is. Big power. He's a huge featherweight. Really good boxing. Fights very aggressive. He knocked out 2 very tough guys in his last 2 fights. His takedown defense has improved a whole lot. His cardio seems to be on point. And he's a real threat in this division, man. Early on when he first got in the UFC, I was just like, whatever. I didn't think that high of him. And he's really, proved me wrong. And really impressed me. And cost me some money, too, in the process. So, he's fighting a guy here who most of his losses have been by finish. Choi's been knocked out twice and submitted twice. All of Steve's wins in the UFC have been by knockout. He knocked out Chepe Mariscal before the UFC. He lost his debut, but that was up a weight class against a giant lightweight in Luis Pena. He showed decent takedowns in at least 1 or 2 of his fights that I watched. And he has good scrambles. He has great ground and pound, nasty elbows from top position. We have seen him hurt in some of his fights and come back and get the knockout still. Guys are always looking to take him down, so he's really improved on the takedown defense, and they often wear themselves out doing that. I could definitely see Choi having success early, maybe even hurting Garcia, but if he can't get the finish, I do think, Garcia will probably land a big shot and put him out. Garcia fights southpaw mostly. He's going to have the better cardio in this fight. You have to respect Choi, man. He's been around a while, but the only super impressive win he has was over Yusuf Zalal, which really surprises me, honestly, that he won that fight. But it was probably up a weight class. Zalal fights, at bantamweight now, I think. One thing I want to point out is that Choi, while he hasn't been knocked out in his last 4 fights, he's been dropped several times in most of them. Holobaugh dropped him several times. Trezano knocked him out. Caceres hurt him and then submitted him. And Aarons, I think, dropped him at 1.2 with a big uppercut. So he's taken a lot of damage in his last 4 fights. Garcia shows 56% striking accuracy with 47% striking defense, 44% takedown accuracy with 89% takedown defense. He averages 1.31 takedowns per fight, and he lands on average 4.85 strikes per minute while absorbing 2.40, and he averages 2.62 knockdowns per fight. He's taking on Sungwoo Choi. He is 31 years old. He is 6 foot tall with a 74.5-inch reach. He's 11-6 and 4-5 in the UFC, and he's a plus 115 underdog. So he's got 6 wins by knockout, no wins by submission. So it'll be neither of these guys will want to fight by submission. So it wouldn't be crazy if one of them won by submission. Choi will have a 1.5-inch reach advantage, and like I said, he's been knocked out twice and submitted twice, and he's a good kickboxer, and he has good power on his punches, but my main worry for him is his durability. And like I said, being hurt a lot in his recent fights, and his first 2 fights in the UFC, he was out-wrestled, and then he was submitted in one of those and out-wrestled in both. So I think he has a weakness with his submission defense, especially when he's hurt, which if you've ever been clipped and then tried to defend a submission, it's fucking hard, either way. But Choi is very fast with his punches. He's a sharp striker, but he does tend to go out and get into wars with people and leave a lot of openings. And, he either knocks them out or gets knocked out or gets dropped multiple times. It can be a pretty ugly fight, whenever he does that. Like the Trezano fight, they were dropping each other left and right. And Trezano finally ended up getting the knockout. But it's completely possible that he wins this fight. But I think if Garcia lands, he'll knock Choi out, man. And he may look to take Choi down early in this fight, take some of the sting off of his punches, wear on him up against the cage. But Choi shows 39% striking accuracy with 47% striking defense, 55% takedown accuracy with 70% takedown defense, and he averages just under 1 takedown per fight, and he lands on average 3.48 strikes per minute while absorbing 3.2. And I I'm going with Garcia to win this fight by knockout. It could be a war early, but I do think Choi will eventually get caught with a punch and dropped. And so I'm going to go with Garcia to win by knockout, round 2. Next up, we got Brad Tavares taking on Jung Young Park. And Brad Tavares is 36 years old. He is 6'1" with a 74-inch reach. He is 20-9 and 15-9 in the UFC, and he's a plus 140 underdog. Tavares has been around a long time. He has all the skills, but yeah, I mean, it kind of seems like we've been starting to see him slow down just a little bit, with his success. He's taken a lot of damage in his last 3 losses, and he was knocked out twice. I don't know that I agreed with the Bruno Silva knockout. He got dropped, but he was still there. The ref stopped it. And I was honestly a little disappointed in his performance against Chris Weidman. He just kind of chose to lay back and throw leg kicks, when I felt like he could have knocked Chris out. But he's fought a ton of tough competition. Can't talk. He's going to be the bigger guy here. His takedown defense has always been very solid. He's going to have a 1-inch reach advantage. This is a step down in competition from who he's been fighting lately, aside from Weidman. But even Weidman's a former champion, so he's landed some clean shots in his last fight against Rodriguez. Possibly won the second round. He has great striking. Not a ton of knockouts, especially lately. 5 wins by knockout, 2 wins by submission. He's never been submitted, but has been knocked out a few times. He's obviously very tough, man. It took Rodriguez 3 rounds to finally knock him out, and he was still standing up taking punches when the ref stopped it. So arguably, he was still there. He could definitely win this fight. Guys, Park could definitely. I don't think that Park's really fought as tough a competition as Tavares. It's not even close. Park will not be able to get the takedowns in this fight, which is something he's kind of relied on in most of his fights recently. And, he couldn't get the takedowns in his last fight, and he ended up losing. But he kind of got out-grappled, there. He was just way smaller than Muniz. Now that I'm saying all this, I'm kind of starting to lean in the direction of Tavares. When before looking into this fight, I was saying it's Park all day. But Tavares has, the advantage in the striking. Maybe not the power, but definitely the more technical striking. He's got good takedown defense. Park won't be able to get him down. So, yeah, I mean, Tavares might win this fight for sure. He shows 43% striking accuracy with 56% striking defense, 27% takedown accuracy with 81% takedown defense, and he averages just under 1 takedown per fight, and he lands on average 3.38 strikes per minute while absorbing 3.15. He's taken on Jun Young Park. He is 33 years old, 5'10" with a 73-inch reach. He is 17-6 and 7-3 in the UFC. He's a minus 170 favorite. 5 wins by knockout, 6 wins by submission. And looking at all his wins now, there are a few decent wins. Eric Anders. Some people might say Albert Duraev is a good win. I don't really agree with that. He's super tough. He has good wrestling, but I don't think he's going to be able to get Tavares down. He uses his jab very well. He has good cardio, but he's never knocked anybody out in the UFC. His last 3 wins were by rear naked choke, but Tavares has never been submitted. And like I said, before looking into this fight, I was saying Park, for sure, without even looking into it. But now that I look into it, I'm not so sure, man. Tavares has been fighting tough guys who knock everybody out. He went 3 rounds with a current champion. He won the second round against Rodriguez. And part of me wonders if Park could make 170 because he's a lot smaller than all these guys. But Park has great calf kicks, good basics. He shows 51% striking accuracy with 54% striking defense. 50% takedown accuracy with 58% takedown defense, which you would think it would be a lot better than that. I guess he does get taken down a lot. He averages almost 2 takedowns per fight, 1 submission per fight, and he lands on average 4.53 strikes per minute while absorbing 3.30. He's got great ground and pound. I just don't see him being able to get the fight there, man. Tavares has solid takedown defense, and I know nobody's going to agree with me on this. I'm not going to get heavily invested in this fight at all, but I'm going to take Tavares to win this fight by decision. I think he can outstrike Park for 3 rounds. And I think this is a big step down in competition, for him. Park went to a split decision with Eric Anders, fought Joseph Holmes, who I don't think ever want to fight in the UFC. Dennis Talulin, we all know that he's tough, but he hasn't really won any fights in the UFC either, maybe one. Albert Duraev, I think he's 2-2 in the UFC on a 2-fight losing streak now, and he gassed out as well. Tavares isn't going to gas out, so I think Tavares has a good chance to get back in the win column here. Next up, we got Choi taking on Bill Algeo. This is another one that I struggled a lot with, and I posted on YouTube to see what everybody else thought. On Tapology, Algeo's favored. Choi is 33 years old. He's 5'10" with a 70-inch reach. He is 14-4-1 and 3-3-1 in the UFC, and he's a plus 130 underdog. He went on a 3-fight losing streak, and then he was out for a few years, doing the military stuff in Korea, mandatory service. And came back, and he should have won that fight with Kyle Nelson. It shouldn't have been a draw. I thought he won every round. And Kyle Nelson just knocked out Bill Algeo. I know it's MMA math, but still, Choi is a great striker, big power in his hands. He has 11 wins by knockout, 1 win by submission. Never been submitted, but was knocked out twice. And almost all of his wins have been by knockout. And surprisingly, he's actually younger than Bill Algeo. And throws great calf kicks. Got taken down in his last fight, but was able to push down on the head and post and eventually roll Nelson over and end up on the top, in the crucifix position. He has good top pressure. He's well-rounded, and even if he doesn't have a ton of submission wins, he's still got pretty good grappling. Great 1-2 down the middle, powerful straight right hand. And the thing that gives me hope here in this fight is that, Bill hasn't knocked anybody out in the UFC, and Bill just got knocked out. And, I said after Bill's last fight that I would never pick him again or put money on him. And after how ridiculous he looked with his hands down, just, getting the crap beat out of him, is a big favorite by Kyle Nelson, and once again, he's a favorite here, and everybody's going with him, but I'm just not so sure. And, it all comes down to how well, Choi can deal with the awkward style of Algeo. I don't think Choi has lost to anybody that wouldn't beat Bill Algeo. Choi shows 53% striking accuracy with 54% striking defense, 20% takedown accuracy with 50% takedown defense. He averages 1.16 knockdowns per fight, and he lands on average 4.74 strikes per minute while absorbing 4.91. And as far as, it's kind of split down the middle on, I got 23 votes on this on YouTube, and 57% went with Choi, 43% went with Bill Algeo, so it's very close. And Bill Algeo is 35 years old. He's 6 foot tall with a 73-inch reach. He is 18-8 and 5-4 in the UFC, and he's a minus 155 favorite. 4 wins by knockout, 7 wins by submission. And he's been knocked out once and submitted twice. He's a few inches taller. He has a 3-inch reach advantage. He has a weird karate-type style that we saw can cause him problems, like, in his last fight, because he always has his hands down. He leaves a ton of openings. Andre Fili kept hitting him with head kicks in that fight because Bill had his hands down too low. And he throws a lot of kicks, side kicks, and whatnot. Doesn't put a ton of power on them, but, he's very effective with them. He fights well from both stances, and I think Bill has the better kicks, but not the harder kicks. Choi has the better hands, but on paper, Choi hasn't won a fight since 2016, even though he should have won his last fight. It was a draw. But, he was out 3 years, so it's not as bad as it looks. But, and I don't want to let my disappointment, in Bill's last fight get in the way of me making a decision, so I'm trying to look at this fight really hard and not just let my bias, because of the last fight, make the pick for me. I was really high on Bill going into his last fight, but Bill shows 52% striking accuracy, 47% striking defense, 47% takedown accuracy with 56% takedown defense. So both these guys have bad takedown defense. He averages a little under 1 takedown per fight, and he lands on average 6.16 strikes per minute while absorbing 4.52. I'm probably going to stay away from this fight altogether. I guess I'll pick Bill Algeo, man. He's gotten the better wins recently, and maybe he'll work on, the holes in his game from his last fight. But I want Choi to win. I'm scared to pick him, though, because of the run he's on right now and whatnot. So, I guess I'll go with Bill Algeo, but not confident in it at all. Next up, we got the co-main event. Kurt Holobaugh taking on Keenan Kruschewsky. And Kurt Holobaugh is 37 years old, 5'11" with a 70-inch reach. He is 20-8 and 1-5 in the UFC, and he's a plus 130 underdog. 7 wins by knockout, 10 wins by submission, but just hasn't really been able to put it together in the UFC. And he has solid striking, but at times his takedown defense has let him down for sure. And he hits real hard. You know, we saw him, beat a bunch of guys trying to get in the UFC, and a bunch of guys that got caught or got cut from the UFC on the Ultimate Fighter show. But he lost to Trey Ogden once he got into the UFC, and this is a fight that I'm really not sure about because Kurt is fighting a guy here who hasn't won in the UFC yet, but had a good record coming in. And my instinct is to go with the younger guy. Holobaugh is very experienced. He's well-rounded. He's got a good game off of his back. He's no easy fight for anyone. And I think we're all kind of super familiar with Holobaugh and his style and how he fights, the pressure and it kind of stays in your face trying to knock you out. But basically for this, I just needed to do a deep dive on his opponent, and see what this new guy's all about, outside of, him losing his debut on short notice, So he's taking on Kruschewsky. He is 33 years old. He is 6 foot tall with a 73-inch reach. He is 15-2 and 0-1 in the UFC, and he's a minus 155 favorite. 4 wins by knockout, 9 wins by submission. So most of his wins have been by finish. Only 2 wins by decision. Never been submitted, but both his losses have been by knockout. He's tall for the weight class. He's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage. And to be fair, man, he came into his last fight completely unprepared on short notice against a guy in Elfsbrenner that has turned out to be a really tough guy. And got a lot of good wins in the UFC. And Kruschewsky had 2 belts in jungle fights. He's very well-rounded. He has a good ground game, but he comes from a kickboxing base. Watching the tape on him, it was very impressive. Great calf kicks, throws great combinations, tends to throw more than one shot at a time. Great with his knees and elbows in close, and good jab. Likes to end his combinations with kicks as well. And he has good submission defense. He's really good at taking the back as well. Lots of wins via rear naked choke. And I think he has a lot of advantages in this fight upon doing the research, provided that his chin just holds up. Holobaugh is hard to finish, so I think I'm going to go with Kruschewsky to win this fight by submission. He is a black belt. I think he lands a big shot on Kurt and then ends up jumping on a submission, taking the back, and getting a rear naked choke here. Next up, we got the main event. Amanda Lemos taking on Jandiroba. And Amanda Lemos is 37 years old. She's 5'4" with a 65-inch reach. She is 14, 3-1, and 8-3 in the UFC, and she's a plus 110 underdog. I think she started out a favorite. Former title challenger, 8 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission. I'm a big fan of hers. I love her style. I love her power. I love that she can knock people out in this weight class. Her weaknesses have been her takedown defense and her submission awareness and defense. And no doubt she's the better striker all day here, has the power advantage on the feet. But Verna's specialty is her weakness. But Lemos is going to have a 1-inch reach advantage. One advantage Lemos will have in this fight is she's been 5 rounds. She's been in the main event before. And I don't think Verna will have any problems taking Lemos down early. But the only question is will she be able to do it for 5 rounds, or will she be able to get a submission? Lemos is still favored on Tapology, and she did a lot of damage in her last fight and was able to pull out the decision even though she got taken down a few times. But her takedown defense still looked pretty bad. Lemos has great kickboxing, great calf kicks, throws nice straight shots, very accurate, fights well from both stances. Her footwork looked way better, in her last fight. She was using a lot of lateral movement. Lemos shows 55% striking accuracy with 44% striking defense. And it says she has 64% takedown accuracy, but also that she has only landed 1 takedown, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. She has 57% takedown defense. She averages almost 1 takedown per fight and 1 knockdown per fight. And she lands on average 3.43 strikes per minute while absorbing 4.21. She's taken on Jandiroba. She is 36 years old, 5'3" with a 64-inch reach. She is 20-3 and 6-3 in the UFC, and she's a minus 145 favorite. One win by knockout, 13 wins by submission. She's never been finished. She's only been beaten by other really good grapplers or wrestlers, but it's not a good look losing to Mackenzie Dern, who Lemos just beat. But the other two losses I can forgive her for. She doesn't have the best striking. It's gotten better than it used to be, but it's not very good at all compared to Lemos. She beat Godinez last time out. It was kind of an impressive win, but going back and watching that fight, it was really close, and it barely won that fight. And she has great single legs and trip takedowns, very strong with her body lock, but she doesn't stand a chance on the feet here. But she is a very high level grappler. She's very slow on the feet, man, but if she gets the clinch, she can usually get the takedown. She shows 39% striking accuracy with 57% striking defense, 36% takedown accuracy with 74% takedown defense. She averages 2.36 takedowns per fight and 1.25 submissions. Lands on average 2.30 strikes per minute while absorbing 2.96. And originally I thought I was going to go with Verna, Jandiroba, because Lemos' takedown defense, but she looks so terrible on the feet and very slow and sloppy, and I just think that Lemos is probably going to chew up her legs, might get taken down a few times, use that lateral movement, and eventually land a big shot on Jandiroba and put Verna away, honestly. I also think Verna will be tired as well in the later rounds because she looked tired in the third round against Godinez. So I'll take Lemos to win by knockout round 3, possibly round 4. And that's it as far as my picks go, guys. I feel like my voice is going out on me. But as far as my bets go, I got just a bunch of small plays on this, man. I got a play on Steve Garcia at -130. That's a half unit play. 2-fight parlay. That's Miranda Maverick and Cody Gibson. That's +125. That's a half unit play. Half unit play on Usman at -140. And a small play on Kruschewsky at -135. It says quarter unit, but I think it was actually like $200, so it's a little less than a quarter unit. And then I've got a underdog parlay just to kind of put my money where my mouth is. I parlayed Tavares and Amil, my two underdogs on this card that I feel have the best chances to win, and that's +602. And I just put $100 on that. Not counting on that one to hit, but it would be cool if it did, And yeah, as far as parlays go, guys, like I said last time, I'm going to stop putting in so many parlays, and how I usually put in 3 or 4 parlays, and usually they'll all end up, losing, and then I'll rebuild one, and maybe that one will hit, or maybe they don't hit at all. But I ended up making 2 on this one. There it is. So the first one is 5 picks. It's Garcia, Kruschewsky, Usman, Gibson, Miranda Maverick. That's +924. And then I just added one fighter to that to kind of boost the value, and I put an underdog on. I added Brad Tavares to it, and that makes it a +2,357. So small parlays, I have better luck with those, so maybe it'll hit. Maybe they'll both hit, but yeah, man, that's it for me this week. Sorry, sound like my voice is going out on me or whatnot, but I appreciate all you for being here. Thank you so much for caring what I have to say and for your support. And yeah, man, that's it for me, guys. I'll see you next week, man. I hope you win some money.